I was driving home one night, as I had not seen my family for about 2 weeks. Filled with excitement, I decided to take a shortcut through a desolated area that I didn't know too well. I had heard stories through the scanner about it, mostly ghostly tales. And I do, as a matter of fact, believe in ghosts. But my eagerness to surprise my wife and kids got the best of me. It was about 3:40 or so in the morning, and I had been on that particular road for about an hour already, and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Suddenly, I get to an area packed with old creepy trees on the side and tons of shrubbery. As usual, my radio was on, and out of nowhere, this horrible static starts to crackle through the speakers. I started to feel chilly and uncomfortable when, wouldn't you know it, I saw a man hanging from a tree on the side of the road. There he was. His body was even swinging from side to side. I stepped on the brake as fast and carefully as I could, but I kept looking through the rearview mirror, and he was still there. I grabbed my coat, my gun, and my flashlight, and I had my phone in my pocket, and I started to dial 911, but there was no signal. I made my way through the shrubs, and when I reached the tree, he was gone. I moved the flashlight around, thinking maybe he got free. I went back to my truck and looked back, and there he was again, hanging like I had seen him before. After this, let's just say I didn't like taking shortcuts anymore. My friend and I stopped at some shady truck stop off of Interstate 37 going towards Corpus Christi, Texas. He fell asleep as usual, and I'm not gonna lie, I was about to pass out too. I finally decided to pull over, and I fell asleep when a little while later, we heard a loud bang on the side of the cab that startled us. We woke up immediately to find this big lizard-like creature with red glowing eyes and sharp-looking teeth looking back at us. No, it wasn't the creature from the movie Jeepers Creepers either, and you don't have to believe me, but we both know what we saw that night. It stood there, I don't know how many minutes, just looking at us, nothing else. After that, it flew over the cab and took off in the dark of night. I'm not one to believe in anything like this, but this I had to share. During the summer of 2005-2006, around 2 a.m., driving back home from Rushville, Illinois, about northeast of the town, there's a rural area filled with cornfields and woods. My father was driving, and I was in the passenger seat. My dad suddenly taps my shoulder and points out the window and tells me, "Look." About 300 yards out or so, there's a large object flying a few hundred feet away from the ground, smoothly, and constantly passing us. It looked like it either had 1 or 2 levels, rows of lights that went along the sides, and bright, large, rectangle windows with rounded corners, spewing out white light. It made no sound, and it flew straight, did not rotate, and it had no blinking or no flashes of any kind, indicating that it could be some sort of small plane or nay traditional aircraft. It kept flying straight forward and disappeared into the distance. I turned to my dad, and we both looked at each other and said, "That was interesting," and kept driving home with no further comment. Many years ago, I was on a shift called Meet and Turn. This is where the driver that is domiciled out of the city will drive a load halfway to its destination, while the other driver that meets him halfway and brings the load where it needs to be delivered. I had been doing runs like these for several months, and I found out that I had to meet on point an hour before the other driver arrived. It was a dark and empty lot around 3 a.m., so since there was still some time to kill, I decided to close my eyes and take a short nap. About 10 minutes into my nap, I was awakened by a barking dog. I tried to ignore it, but the bark carried on for several minutes, and it grew louder and closer. At this point, it became clear that he's either trying to alert me of something, or he's just being a pain in the butt. So I sat up and looked out my window, and what I saw left me motionless. Standing there, inches on the other side of the glass, was a man around 35 years of age. He was a large fellow, and he was barking at me. His eyes were crazy, and he was even frothing a little from his mouth. The sheer creepiness struck me, and gently, without making any sudden movements, I reached down and started my truck and slowly started pulling away. As I was doing so, he was chasing after me, much like you would expect an angry dog, and still barking as I kept pulling away. Needless to say, I don't take naps on the job anymore. I used to drive between San Francisco and Cheyenne, Wyoming a lot of the times. It's about 16 to 20 hours of driving, depending on the weather. My second time driving that route, I was driving at night, when suddenly, my truck starts to make this odd grinding noise. Sounded like if I had run over something and it got stuck. It's about 2 a.m. and I pull up to a very well-lit rest stop, and I wake my buddy up, who had been sleeping the whole time. As we both make our way out of the vehicle, I started to explain to him the situation about the grinding noise, when we started to hear what it sounded like, a kid crying. There's not a car in sight besides ours. At the same time, we had heard frequent stories about child trafficking and kidnappings nearby, so we decided to check it out. We grabbed our flashlights and made our way towards the bathrooms since the noise was coming from there. As we get closer, we realized it was coming from the woman's bathroom. It's a low, dull sobbing, and we were prepared for the worst. We walked in, expecting to see someone brutally beaten or worse, and we see nothing, but only hear the sound. It is still there, but there's no one. It's completely empty. We turned the lights on and still nothing. We checked each stall just to make sure, and nothing. We even looked exactly where the noise was coming from, and again, nothing. Is it a hidden camera? A speaker? My buddy sees a small window and opens it up, and the noise deceased. We stood there for a few seconds, and the window slams shut on its own, and the crying begins again. We were out of that bathroom in seconds as we ran towards the truck, and he could still hear the crying. Of course, the grinding noise is still there, so this time I pull up to another rest stop some miles away where we checked underneath, and we saw some sort of red and silver metal stuck in there, and we couldn't take it out. A few days later, I took it to a mechanic buddy of mine, and he told me that the piece of scrap metal that was stuck was part of a kid's bicycle. I don't know if this is somehow related to our experience, but it was one of those moments for me that I'll never forget.
Hey everyone, Dismal Hero here. Thanks for checking out the video, and if you like what you saw, make sure to subscribe so you're always up to date with my new videos. Thank you again for watching. see you next time.